again, I'm much more prescriptive with my students now than I used to be. And so I would specifically say to students now, okay, this is an aspect that you're interested in. Go and access 10 texts, find out what that is, and write something about that. Right? And then bring it back to me, and then we will discuss how that informs, adds to your research topic. And so I would say do it in bits, because if you do it in bits, then you can keep coming back and thinking, okay, what's that got to do with the next bit? What's that got to do with my research question? So rather than just doing, reading and doing everything, and again, I always say to students, downloading is not the same as reading. Unfortunately.
There's some pragmatic things, some technical things like if you're going to read a book, or if you're going to read an article, whatever it is, look at an image, say where it comes from. If you're going to actually take a quote down, make sure you put the page number where it came from. All those sorts of things when you're actually writing, you're going to have to go back to. And some things which took me ages to do, for example, which I'd recommend, certainly for better students, when you're reading a study, for example. Well, what sort of study was it? Was it a questionnaire given to 1,000 people? Does it come from a self-study? Because sometimes one reads something, I think, or looks at something, and one gets from it the conclusions. But what's the basis of those conclusions? Where do they come from? Because I think in the literature review, that in itself might be something one uses to organise the literature review. Because I think that'd be my other point with a literature review. How does one avoid it being a shopping bag in which everything's there all mixed up, and you put your hand in, pull something out, but if you just look in the shopping bag, it's a bit hickledy-pickledy. So some way of organising that review which helps give meaning to the thesis. There's different ways of doing it. I mean, I try and give the example of my own work when I was doing the PhD and so on, where the way I organised, the words I used to organise the literature review were the same words and concepts which I used to organise my analysis. So in a sense there was like a parallel way of organising things. And I felt that helped make the structure meaningful, sort of added something to the literature review. Not the only way of doing it. It might be that one goes through an historical review of the literature, because it's useful to see how things have changed over time and why they've changed. And that might then, all of these ways of organising the literature should help one analyse the data and so on. There's different ways of doing it, but I suppose that would be the key thing. Avoid it being a shopping bag and try and have some ways of organising. So if it's going to be a shopping bag, compartments.
Well, I think it's really, as far as the literature is concerned, it's really important to get two ideas over. One is to try and get them to focus on the area they're actually interested in and not everything else, bar the kitchen sink. And secondly is also to go outside their discipline for people who've been working on it in other disciplines but might be very useful for actually helping them to inform what they're doing. And I always try to say that the literature kind of informs you with, well, two things, with the theory of the research question, behind the research question you're looking at, and also about research methodologies. It's helping you with two things. And you look at the literature in order to say, well, this is what people have been saying about this area, whatever it is, and this is what I am then going to investigate, and this is then, when you come to the discussion, this is what the literature said, this is what I found, and how does this work together?
I mean, what I would do is to try and have a broad overview of the literature so that one gets the general sense of what's around there. Not that you've read everything in depth, but you have a broad picture. So to read a few things that are very general and very broad, and then decide from there, well, which are the areas that I want to work on in depth. And I suppose the only other thing to say is to really keep clear notes. So always make a record, however you decide to keep that, of all the details of the book you could ever want to know, including page numbers and quotations, because that's really difficult if you've forgotten where those are. And you think, well, I know it's the bottom right-hand corner of the big orange fat book, but that isn't terribly helpful when you want to go and find it on Voyager. So I would say take notes and make sure that the notes you take, you're very clear as to what you're writing down that are your words and what you're writing down that are from the text, so you put them in quotation marks, so you're always clear about that. And as you're keeping those notes, in some form or other, interrogate them like questions and say, oh, this links to this and this links to something else. And you might sometimes want to code them with colour or with symbols so that, oh yes, all the things that are orange all relate to this topic and so on. And different people find different ways, but it's somehow making it all manageable, because you don't want to go back reading everything over and over again.